What did I think of the PBD? Patrick. I don't know what his last name is. The debate between him and Roland Martin. Uh, I think that Patrick needs to stick to what he's good at or his area of expertise, which is finance. If he wants to expand his horizon and start talking about other subjects, politics, race relations, just the current atmosphere, all the topics that touch the current atmosphere in America, well, he's going to have to do his own research and be open minded enough to actually understand and know what the other side's arguments are rather than simply parroting or embracing conservative talking points that don't hold up to the lightest scrutiny in real time. Now, some people will argue from the conservative side that, Patrick isn't as well versed or, in terms of his counter arguments as, let's say, somebody like Steven Crowder or um, Matt Walsh or I'm trying to think who else. Who's a good like spin person? I wouldn't say Candace Owens because Candace Owens has her shit has not been held up to the lightest scrutiny. She gets gobbled up. Um, Actually, one of my favorite debates, in terms of those that just regurgitate conservative talking points was, and I don't think it gets talked about enough because it was actually a true slaughter. Was Grandmaster Jay versus Jesse Lee Peterson. That was a slaughter. That was an absolute slaughter of Jesse Lee Peterson, and probably one of the first. Because Jesse, he has his own little tactics of get people ruffled and people don't know how to react and respond. And Grandmaster Jay was having none of it. That's one thing about Grandmaster Jay that I have to give him credit on is he most certainly had superior debating skills and even interview skills when being interviewed by the news than a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of commentators on YouTube. But getting back to Patrick, um, no, he was just like even when Roland, and I don't like Roland's uh, debate style. He kind of reminds me of myself when I was younger, where you get all emotionally charged. And I know, via my maturity of, going through the blog talk radio days and all that, it doesn't present well if you get excited. If you're cool, calm, and collected and you simply lay out the points, you don't get into all this emotional shit that Roland was getting into. Really? Really? You mean to tell me? And then you're stuttering and you're trying to talk over people. I either get to a point where I'm like, either I say you're not going to talk over me, or I just back down and I say, are you done yet? Can I finish my point? You know what I'm saying? You just back off completely and say, can I finish my point? Because if you do that enough times, then the other person really starts to look bad, and even other people listening, even those in support of that person, will start to get irritated. It's like, goddamn, man, let him finish his goddamn point before you decide to jump in and interject with your, talking points that don't have any substance. Shit like, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, all that nonsense, right? But yeah, Roland Martin. I mean, Roland Martin has the information. He has the facts. Sometimes he has. Sometimes I feel like he can take a shortcut and he doesn't have to walk through the details, because sometimes the person that's like, let me finish, they can get really over obsessed with laying out every little detail. And it's like, look, we don't have that type of time. Go for the jugular, go right to the point, go right to the money, go right to how this impacts the money, because all of this is tied back to money. And it's one of the things that I'm glad Roland Martin said. All this black people, you need to operate like X, or you need to operate like white folks, or whatever group you want to insert to make the standard. That cannot and will not happen without a serious injection of resources. Black people never got their reparations for slavery. They never got their 40 acres and a mule. And every time black people tried to establish a community, it was either burnt down to the ground. And then come the 1960s, urban renewal and the 1955 Highway Commission Act, and they ran highways through those black communities. They may not have been, as shiny and new as the what you would consider a white community, because white people had all the resources, but at the end of the day, they were still a community. It was still, neighborhoods where people knew each other and respected each other, and tried to make the best of a bad situation, that is living under the system of white supremacy in this country. One of the things that irritated me about Patrick is this dude is Iranian. This dude came here as a refugee. His parents fled the 1979 what do you call that, the Islamic Revolution, and then he went to Germany with his family, and then from Germany he came to the US. And to sit there and act like, and this is what I told you, this is what a lot of the conservative talking heads do. They literally want to act like Black American history started in 1985 and that everything before that has no impact on today. Okay, as I've stated numerous times, my own father was born in American apartheid. He did not have the same rights as any other white citizen when he was born. And so, to sit there and act like, my father had the same opportunities as, somebody who was white, like how much further could my father have been if, the first, several, years of his life, he wasn't impacted by Jim Crow. And we all know that Jim Crow didn't end overnight. It's not like it was like, oh, it's 1965. Oh, racism is over on the books. So now everybody, stop being racist. You can change the laws, but that you can't change the hearts and minds of men. But to sit there and act like, all of that, all of the hindering of black people establishing wealth and then being able to pass that wealth on, that has no impact on a day is just an insane absurdity. And for Patrick to be an Iranian refugee or immigrant and not make the connection, not say, yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from, is just, it's mind boggling. And I think in part, with Patrick, it comes down to the fact that Patrick is a white presenting immigrant. If you told me Patrick was Italian, Greek, from the Balkans, from if he was Turkish, if you told me any of that, I might even go with French. If you told me Patrick was any of that, I would believe you. He doesn't, he could easily pass for Italian. If he was going to try to, pass off as white, he could easily pass off as Italian, but he's Iranian. But to sit there and ignore the policies that were put in place or the things that black people were denied, and I keep repeating them because I want black people to be well versed and educated on these subjects when it comes to America, even African refugees when they come here, because a lot of them will come with the same beliefs, the same energy, African Americans are lazy, and they don't know the history. This is why CRT is desperately needed. They don't know about the denial of the Homestead Act, which was basically the land grab, when it came to the Louisiana Purchase. They don't know about redlining. They don't know about blockbusting, and I'm saying redlining, I mean, that was backed by the U.S. government because the banks get their money from the federal government. So you have redlining, you have blockbusting, you have eminent domain, you have urban renewal, you have convict leasing, you have debt peonage, you have COINTELPRO, where black organizations that were trying to empower the black community were basically put on the FBI's like terrorist watch list and eradicated. False charges, assassinations of people like Medgar Evers. And we all know the involvement of the FBI when it came to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Then you have, even before that, the purgings of black community: Tulsa, Rosewood, Elaine, Arkansas, Wilmington, North Carolina, um, Slocum, Texas, Ocoee, Florida. Did I say Rosewood? I mean, a bunch of these places that I have named numerous times before, and those are just the ones that are just off the top of my head. There's other ones to be listed. Just false accusations of whatever it may be. False accusations of rape, they go in there, burn the place down. What would the African American community look like if those communities were never burnt down to the ground? I don't have to go back to reparations for slavery for black people to even begin to discuss reparations. I can start right in the 20th century. And all those U.S. government-backed policies that disrupted wealth generation when it came to African Americans. And I'm saying it's no different than why Patrick's family had to leave Iran. When you want to talk about the U.S. government, the CIA's involvement in removing Mossadegh, who was the duly elected Iranian leader, and then was replaced with a puppet, that being the Shah of Iran. And then that is why you had the Islamic Revolution, because Mossadegh was not operating in Western interest, and he wanted to nationalize the Iranian oil and basically give it to the people. Do something similar to what you saw with who was the leader of Venezuela? I'm going blank. Who's the leader of Venezuela that nationalized? Venezuela leader, what was his name? Leader who died. Let me get his name. Hugo Chavez. There you go. I was going blank for a second. Hugo Chavez. Same type of thing. And the West, America, America hates socialism. I mean, again, what's his name? The guy, the white guy that does all that, the Harris dude. Is it John Harris? What's his name? Why do I suck with names? Why do I suck with names? You know what I'm talking about. The guy that does all the documentaries on YouTube. He's got a video that he just recently came out with that has to do with, come on, U.S. what is it? Coup d'etats. U.S. coup d'etats. What's his name? Johnny Harris. I know it was John Harris. Johnny Harris. All the coup d'etats, especially in Latin and South America. And all the involvement, the Banana Republic, the way the U.S. went in and basically stole Hawaii, took Puerto Rico, and went in there, the Philippines, Vietnam, anybody they don't like, just slap communism on it, which is the same thing that you see conservatives doing now when it comes to anything that they don't like. Anything they don't like is wokeism. Anything they don't like is communism, socialism, and anti-Americanism. So there's a whole bunch of McCarthyism going on, currently right now when you want to talk about, what the left, what the folks on the right really stand for. It is maintaining the system of white supremacy. But I'm saying to act like the U.S. government and all these policies that they supported and all the racial disparities that they supported have no impact on African Americans is like me telling Patrick that his family being forced to flee, Iran and go to Germany and then come to the U.S. has nothing to do with the U.S. government and the CIA's, disruption of the Iranian government. Everything that he went through, all his struggles that he went through as a child are directly tied to the U.S. government's involvement in the removal of Mossadegh. But he can't make the connection. You see? So, like I said, when it comes to African Americans and talking about how the past impacts, current times or even the future, we don't get that same courtesy. People can tell us about their plight, what happened to them. But when black people talk about what happened to us and the things that were put in place, and I mean, you're talking, you're not talking like something that was temporary, something that was less than a decade. You're talking, 255 years of slavery, then another 100 years of Jim Crow. You know what I'm saying? Again, slavery ended in, 1865, and then black people didn't get fully recognized as citizens until 1965. That's when it started. Mind you, the schools didn't even integrate. Black people were going to this, lesser schools, less funded schools, this whole separate but equal until 1955. So black people were not getting the same education. Black people were not getting, the same information. And again, when you have people locked out of a system for that long, they adjust to the conditions of poverty. They adjust to, the ways in which, the system are. This is why you had a lot of older black people when it came to Obama being elected. The older black people right off top, oh, he gonna get assassinated, right off top. Oh, the white folks, they ain't never going to vote for Obama. Like, just right off top. They couldn't believe it. But, people will say, well, isn't that a sign that things have changed? There's a lot of symbolism going on, but things have not changed, on the ground, as it pertains to the tangibles. This is why you have black people that are running around talking about tangibles, not symbolism that, the older black people, they fell for. Make you feel good. Oh, we integrated this. We desegregated that. Right. But then when you come to actually having money and resources that allows you to make moves in this society, that actually allows you to have power. Right. No, you can't have. You can have all the Jesus you want. You can have all the Allah you want. You can have all the Yahweh you want. You can have everything, that's not tangible will give you that. But that which is tangible, that which allows you to oppose us, to saber rattle, to say it is not the way. Nah, we can't let you have that. Hell no. The to actually have the ability to self-determination. This is why, arguments about, conservatives with personal responsibility is a bunch of BS. Because you cannot be personally responsible in a situation where you're denied the tools to even do so. And every time black people, everybody wants to argue like black people have never established anything. Like I always say, it's funny because white people have burnt down and destroyed a whole bunch of intact communities that they want to scramble and run around and say that black people never created. When you got the burnt lots that are still there, when you have the transfer of property with no seller just being transferred over to white people, it was taken. It's bad enough they took black people from the continent of Africa, and then they go over here, and then what little bit you do create after screaming, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, they take that shit. All of it is a damn psyop. People say, oh, black people need to stop seeing themselves as victim. Another conservative talking point. Black people are the victim because they are seen as the enemy. Always have been, always will be. Plain and simple. At the end of the day, white supremacy is about ensuring that black people cannot set the pace, set the tone, define things that white people would be subject to. So that means we got to make sure that they don't have the ability to generate wealth and generate, money and resources. And then people will say, well, how come, when it comes to, the other groups that, they come here and they can, make moves and do X, Y, and Z. Number one, very small populations. Like when people talk about Asians are only about 3% of the population. East Asians, Indians are about 2% of the population, and they're only in particular small pockets. Um, the other thing is, they haven't been here as long as African Americans. That history and them having a low population and the animosity, you only saw arguments about yellow peril and anti-Asianness that, existed in this country when it came to, the West Coast and California. You didn't really see that on the East Coast because that's not where the Asian population centers were. Just like, in Texas, what population do they primarily discuss? Like that guy that went into the supermarket and shot it up, he didn't go in there looking for black people. He was looking for Mexicans. You see? And so around the country, it's different strokes for different folks, depending on what the demographics are. The other thing is when these other groups come here, not only do they come here voluntarily, they come here with their language, their culture, their belief systems, and their political and their orientations, intact. Those things are intact. With black people, all that was stripped from black people. And every time black people tried to pull themselves up, here comes white supremacy right there to kick them down. It's one of the reasons why even with, gangster culture that exists in the black community, thank you, the FBI with, excuse me, not the FBI, the CIA dumping drugs in the black community via the Reagan Iran Contras. The black people of I'd argue the 80s, Generation X, they already saw their parents and grandparents. They did the marching. They did the protesting. They did all that. And America still gave black people their ass to kiss. Why am I going to go out here and conform to white standards of behavior and mannerisms if at the end of the day, they're only going to let me get so far? They're only going to block and deny. No matter how much I conform to, what they want, they're not going to allow me, to get to that next level. They're simply not going to allow. You're going to see too many black faces and say, oh no, oh hell no, shut it down. They'll tolerate tokens because tokens serve a purpose. Tokens serve the purpose of saying, what are you talking about? We're not racist. We have a black eye. What are you talking about? You see, but they do not want it to ever get to any sort of, critical mass. Fortunately, I mean, outside of, you had purges of Asian communities in San Francisco, which they got reparations for. There have been Asian communities that have been purged. But black people, we were the first communities, to be purged relentlessly. And when many of these other groups come here, they just got here. Especially the way that white conservatives, are jumping up and down and complaining, they need to speak English. If they don't speak English, that means that they just got here. If you feel some type of way about them not speaking English, it's because they just got here. They don't have the historical trauma of African Americans. They didn't have everything stripped away from them on this soil. And then even when it comes to the immigrants, the audacity of many of them, when they come here and again, by choice, and they want to say, oh, America's the land of opportunity and this, that, and the third. I'm like, oh, well, why don't you go stay in your own country and build it up? Why don't you go when my old country, it doesn't allow us to do this, and why not? Why not? You have elections, don't you? Right? They don't even examine their own cowardice in leaving their own countries, leaving their own nations. They don't even acknowledge the cowardice. They just want to shit on black people and talk about, oh, you're not taking advantage of the opportunities. You bitch ass nigga. Leaving your country of origin. Right? Why don't you have a coup? Why don't you go up there and oppose the government? Why don't you go out there and fight them? Oh, we don't have the weapons. We don't have this. We don't have that. Oh, sounds like excuses to me. Right? And that would be me additionally completely ignoring just how much in many of these countries that people flee from and come to America has done things to keep despots in power, to keep Saddam Hussein. You know why the Bushes accused Saddam Hussein having freaking weapons of mass destruction? Because the Bushes, the Prescott family, had receipts. They had receipts. Now, I don't truly believe that they gave them weapons of mass destruction, but what I'm saying, the point that I'm making is that the Bushes gave Iraq tons of weapons to fight the Iranians, they got whole massive graveyards in Iran, due to a military tactic that they call the besiege, where they just basically give young men weapons, and they just are, just basically rush the enemy in waves, right? Getting chopped down by machine gun fire until the soldiers run out of ammunition and just are completely overrun. It's known as the besiege, right? But the U.S. backed Iraq's war with Iran, right? Because I think they got that whole Shia Sunni thing, because Iran is a Shia nation, and the majority of the Middle East is Sunni, and you got other factions. You got Wahhabis in Syria. I mean, not Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. You got Alawites in Syria. Bashir al-Assad is an Alawite, right? Is his name Bashir? I think it's Bashir al-Assad. Let me get my names right. Bashir al-Assad. Yeah. Is it Bashar al-Assad? That's how you got to say it. Bashar, not Bashir, not with an I, with an A. But yeah, as long as black people know their history, since these other people, just want to talk out of their ass like Patrick, again, like Dr. Hendrik Clark said, those who are my intellectual equals, I debate. Those who are not, I teach. And black people are going to have to go out here and do a whole bunch of teaching. Stuff that can be verified, stuff that can be looked up. Make the people feel like assholes because they don't know the history. And, if we can't get CRT into the schools, whether you want to call it CRT or not, the fact of the matter is it's real history. It's American history that they don't want to talk about. They didn't teach us about redlining in school. They didn't teach us what that was. They didn't teach us about urban renewal and how that impacted the black community. Hell, they barely taught us about the assassination of black leaders. For the majority of my life growing up, I thought Malcolm X was just a black radical, and that Martin Luther King was all about love, hearts, Care Bears, and rainbows. When reality is both of them had periods of growth, but I'm saying, my attitude and belief system is way more in line with Malcolm X. And when it comes to Martin Luther King, my attitude is way more in line with Martin King at the end of his life, before he was assassinated. Because as soon as Martin Luther King started talking about money, that's when they had to get rid of his ass. When he was up there talking about kumbaya and everybody hold hands and little white girls playing with little black boys and holding hands, that's the part that white society likes. They want that Professor Xavier version of Martin Luther King. They don't want the, talking about, that if you've seen it, the I think it was ABC special, or was it ABC or NBC? It might have been I'm going to say it was NBC, but it was Martin Luther King's last interview, and where he broke that sucker down. He talked about Jewish people and them being able to change their last names. He talked about, this country gave white people an economic floor with the Homestead Act and subsidizing, farmers and just many other things that were done to give white Americans an economic floor. And black Americans were never given that economic floor. When white people want to talk about, oh, it's a handout. No, it's what was owed. It's what was owed, especially off of the backs of all the free labor that African Americans, gave this country. So again, a lot of these people, man, they talk out of turn. They talk out of their ass. They don't know American history. And I can imagine how when you don't know some shit and you're talking out of your ass, you really think you're right. You really think you're saying something. You really think you're laying some shit out. See, it's about personal responsibility. That's what it is. Because American history for African Americans started in 1985, and I just think black people are lazy. Right? Not seeing any of the ways in which the black community was intentionally sabotaged and crippled. Intentionally sabotaged and crippled. So that is why CRT is so desperately needed in these schools. Again, I don't care what you want to call it. Call it CRT, call it something else, come up with a new name if you want. We all know what we're talking about, which is history. The ugly parts of American history that go beyond slavery. People want to act like slavery ended and America freed the slaves and everything was good, all the way up until black people just started complaining in 2022. Everything was good up until George Floyd, until 2020. And then black people, they just started going crazy and we don't know why. Martin Luther King, he resolved all of this back in the 60s when he gave his I Have a Dream speech. But damn the way that black people were being treated, damn the way that black people's socioeconomic conditions, have virtually not changed at all. Damn all of that. So nah. These people are they're just full of shit. They're full of shit, and they need to be called out every time they bring up these ahistorical talking points, because that's what they are. They're ahistorical, and then act like the left hand doesn't wash the right hand. That one event doesn't have an impact on the other. It's like acting like 9/11 didn't change the whole dynamics of air travel and what we have to go through when we go through TSA. Like there wasn't a reaction, a response that is permanent. The white community has done untold amounts of damage to the black community, and they don't want to rectify it. That's why, when I look at the 6 o'clock news and I see all these young black teenagers out there robbing and carjacking and home invading and everything else, I don't care. I do not care. I'm like, why should I care? You created the situation. And then over the last 60 years, the white community has done everything in their power to make the situation worse. And then they double down on their bullshit. See, that's why they can't be helped, because, look at them. Look at what they're doing. They deserve everything they get, which is nothing. Right? And then they double down and the situation gets worse and worse. And then the crime gets worse and worse. They choose crime, right? And then completely even ignoring the aspects that negatively affect everybody, like deindustrialization of America, which I've talked about with now how much it's spilling onto the white boys. Now the young white men are frustrated. I'm like, oh no, I thought it was personal responsibility. Pull yourselves up by the bootstraps. The bootstraps that they don't have because these jobs of manufacturing were shipped overseas. The bootstraps that they don't have because, unlike the generations that came before them, they're not getting, subsidized housing with Levitt towns and shit like that. They're not getting, that. They're not being given an economic base, an economic floor. And that's where, in my opinion, a lot of the animosity comes from, because today's millennials and zillennials do not have it as good as their boomer parents and grandparents. They don't. The boomer parents and grandparents, why do you think they're the ones that came up with the phrase "Make America Great Again"? Why do you think they want to go back to their childhood? Why do you think that? Because it was that good. Or I should say the silent generation is the one that actually, got all the goodies. But people would argue, well, they're the ones that fought the war, and they're the ones that reaped the benefits of basically the rest of the world being bombed to hell after World War II, and there being an economic boom, and the boomers, the children, being, the millennials, parents, and the zillennials, grandparents. They're the ones that grew up in that whatever you want to call it, the atomic age. So if we're not going to be honest about American history and how it affected different groups and different peoples differently, and African Americans being one of the most disadvantaged, then again, we're just going to be a whole bunch of circular arguments. But we got to have black people that are well versed on the history of what took place in America, and even, getting into, foreign politics, even looking at the way that Western powers have had assassinations in Africa of African nations and leaders, again, engaging in self-determination. So, we have to be well versed on that. If we're going to make arguments and file grievances and stuff like that, and not just have, some black entertainer or celebrity who is not well versed get up on the microphone and say a bunch of dumb shit that's going to have Steven Crowder and Matt Walsh, jump up and easily be able to dismiss and make an ass out of that person, claiming that what they're saying is fanciful or ridiculous. Because that black person that decided to get on the mic, somebody like Akon, is not well versed on the history. You see, they become disconnected, or they were never educated on the subject as well. Like, white people are not the only ones that need CRT. Black people need CRT as well, because there's a lot of black people that don't take the time. Hell, even for me, if it wasn't for platforms like YouTube with all the amount of documentaries, magnificent self-made documentaries that would never be put out there if it wasn't for, the content creators, stuff that would never get through the filters of power to actually be made into a documentary. It's like, oh shit, I didn't know this. Even though, there were, many publicly backed, documentaries that, like example, some of the PBS specials are excellent. Frontline News, some of the stuff is excellent, where it's like actual real journalism that doesn't have a heavy bias in it. And I know when people make their own individual content, all content, comes with, some degree of bias. But there's some subjects that, the powers that be, they just don't want to cover it. They don't want to highlight that. They don't want to show that. Because then people start saying, oh, so this is what went down. And they start making demands, and they start demanding that things in the system change. And they don't want that. So, this is, we have to be, all of us, all black people have to be better at knowing what the hell they're talking about is when we get into these conversations. Think y'all need to know the details. And that much I'll give, Roland Martin credit on, even though sometimes I think he gets a little bit too emotional when he wants to debate. Are you serious? He gets all animated and excited. I can be animated and excited in my own personal individual videos because it's just me, basically giving a monologue. But when you're actually in a debate, it's a whole different mode that you have to operate in terms of how you have to carry yourself and how you have to engage and respond. You got to put your representative on. The way that I make videos, I'd say more than 50% of my videos, the way I make videos is not how I would engage in a debate. So anyway, I think that's it. That's all I have to say about the, PBD. I'm glad, I'll say this much, I'm glad that these sort of discussions are happening, that, again, they stopped doing this in the 60s. They stopped doing this shit when Malcolm X was they thought they were cornering Malcolm X, and he was serving them their ass. Same thing with Martin Luther King. You're not dealing with dummies. They thought they would go up there and try to slander people. Aren't you anti-Semitic? You know what I mean? Like that type of bullshit. And they beat right around that crap and be made asses of. Come with those, those sort of white dismissive talking points. And see, they don't do that anymore. They don't have long form debate. I think the only people that are still doing that is probably Oxford, even though now I see Vice has kind of gotten into it, but even that's kind of edited and clipped, but it beats nothing. Vice is trying to shift over and try to take, some of Jubilee's quote unquote market share, because Jubilee was really the first one to really, get, people from opposing sex and put them in a space and get them to go back and forth. And Vice was like, wait a minute. They're taking our market share, even though they weren't doing that before. They were just making documentaries. But I think some of that shift is caused by the fact that a lot of Vice's documentaries, due to the YouTube gods, are getting demonetized by putting, certain content in their videos or certain images. Like YouTube is just ridiculous with their shit, with their censorship. It's just it's been ridiculous ever since YouTube got monetized. And that's the way that the powers that be control a lot of the narratives. They're not gonna pay. They're not gonna have their money go to funding people that they want to shut up, that they don't want their messages to be disseminated out there. That's why if you want to make money on YouTube, you gotta be on some happy-go-lucky shit. Either that, or as I've pointed out with many of the black conservatives, if you notice, they've been on the rise. They get in the bag from white folks. Just tell them what they want to hear. Pander to them, cater to them, and they'll throw their money at you. They'll buy your t-shirts, buy your mug. You know what I mean? Just go up there and just coon out, and they will throw their money because they want, their black person that absolves them of all white guilt, makes them feel good. So that's a hustle. But I'm trying to think if there was something else I wanted to say about the whole situation. But yeah, I mean, that's just how I feel about the PBD and the long form debate. This is, I wish Patrick, had more knowledge. Maybe it would have been a better debate. Same way when he went up there with Pac-Man. Pac-Man, he was laying a lot of shit out. They were talking about politics, and it's like Patrick, man, you don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Well, I don't believe that is not the sort of response a grown ass man who's what is Patrick, like in his mid to late 40s? That's not the type of response that somebody should be given. That's a grown ass man. Well, I don't believe that. That's not an emotionally, overly emotional type of response. I don't know what is. I don't believe that. I'm like, come on, really? That's all you got? I don't believe that. Man, if that don't sound like the type of the women that sit up there on some of these panels on YouTube, I don't know what does. It's just anything they don't like. I don't believe that. I'm like, you can look it up. I mean, here's the links. Here's several links. Here's the supporting evidence. This is well documented. It's unfortunate you don't know what's going on, but this is well documented. There's certain things that you should be able to just state as an obvious truth and be able to move the conversation forward. But that's another thing. A lot of people, they don't like nuance. They like, what's easy, what's an easy thought, for them to digest and swallow. And they don't look at the nuances. You know what I mean? Like example, folks that'll be like, what was some frustrating shit I saw the other people talking about? Well, there were black people who owned slaves in the South. They were slave owners, right? Acting like they're trying to demonstrate or highlight that black people engaged in the same evil, right? And it's like completely ignoring the fact that they were buying their own relatives and children and wives, right? They knew they couldn't beat the system of slavery, so they were like, all right, well, we can at least own the plantation ourselves, and control the means of production, and they're all related in family on that plantation. But that gets overlooked. Same thing. I was watching somebody making a video, and this was a black conservative that was like, "Oh man, we didn't know this history," right? And talking about Democrats and how Democrats were the party of the opposition of Reconstruction, right? But completely ignoring the fact that today's Republicans of the South, their grandparents and great grandparents were Democrats. They were the Dixiecrats. Nobody moved. Nobody relocated. These people have harbored the same feelings all throughout American history. White Southerners have always been about white supremacy and opposed, any sort of progressive move, with the same type of talking points that you hear, today about, why they don't want to integrate the schools. They were having the same type of arguments about losing their way of life as they are when people want to talk about CRT or anything progressive for that matter. But to sit there and act like, when you got white people running around talking about heritage, not hate, and they're Republicans, the people screaming heritage, not hate, you wear your ex, I'll wear mine. What do you think their grandparents were? Where do you think they learned their hate and their racism? They learned it from their Dixiecrat great grandparents and grandparents. But people will sit there and be like, they want to look at it from the standpoint of just parties as opposed to regions and where people actually live and reside and what is the overall sentiment of those regions. Same thing I'm saying about this girl, Madison Brooks, that they're trying to slam these boys with claiming that they raped her, third-degree rape from that she was too drunk. And at the end of the day, it's no. These young men had sexual relations with this white girl, and she got hit by a car, and they want somebody to pay for her death because they're incensed by the idea of this precious, pretty, demure white woman having sex with a bunch of savages, right? It's the same old classic racist Southern, a trope. It's the same old shit, same old birth of a nation nonsense. Those people that harbor those type of sentiments were Democrats. They were not New York Democrats, not Chuck Schumer. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that today's Democrats don't have their own version of passive aggressive racism, but it's not the same group, not the same party. This country has fixed demographics. It's heritage, not how can it be heritage if you're trying to make the argument that today's Democrats who now reside in the Northeast, are the same as Democrats from the 1870s that lived predominantly in the South. It just again, people like, and it's so sad because there's so many dumb people. When you read the comments, you see all these like white people in the comments that are like, yeah, and let the truth ring. What are you talking about, dude? Yeah, let the truth be told. Yeah, they don't want to share this information. Huh? They don't want to share this information. What would this information even do? Because it's, again, the demographics are the same. Black people know what the hell is up when you're in the deep South. We know that Mississippi is profoundly racist. We know this. Even though it has a majority black population, we know this. We know where the Klan is. We know where the Klan feels comfortable marching down the goddamn street. You know what I'm saying? They got the new Klan, the freaking, what's the damn group? Patriot Front. They got ran the fuck out of Philly. No, nigga. Take your ass all the way up North Broad. Go up North Broad. You know what I'm saying? Go up there where Pbd Crack is, where Pbd Crack, let the Mac go ring. You know what I'm saying? Go walk your ass up there. Nah, they ain't gonna do that shit. They gonna sit there and circle City Hall. Nah, motherfucker, go take your ass up all the way up. You know what I'm saying? Take your ass up to North Philly. You know what I'm saying? Go up there by Frankfurt. Go up there by Strawberry Mansion. You know what I'm saying? Go up there by Kensington. Go up there by the Badlands. Take your ass up there with that noise. Ain't gonna do that. You know, so again, you know, we know what time it is. These folks want to sit around, they want to play dumb, they want to act like, you know, they want to mischaracterize, they want to, basically, try to gaslight everybody on everything. But anyway, I'm making this video too long. I want to end this video. So that's all I got to say. That's my video. SW Pete. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.